Lawyer of the billionaire missed the trial. The intern staff took over and saved $500 million. Marcus Whitmore destroyed 15 families' pensions to buy his third yacht. The evidence sat in offshore accounts. The trial was scheduled for 9 a.m. $500 million hung in the balance, enough to restore every stolen retirement, every foreclosed home, every shattered dream that his hedge fund had crushed beneath Italian leather soles. But someone had been watching from the copy room all along. 3 years ago, Marcus strutted through the courthouse, not guilty on a technicality, while elderly victims wept in the gallery. Today, he owns half of Manhattan's skyline, his face on Forbes covers, his legal team legendary, 12 partners from Sullivan and Cromwell, each billing $4,000 per hour. In 6 hours, that same courtroom, his victim's last chance. And the one person who could destroy him now works 3 floors below his penthouse office. Invisible, minimum wage, carrying the folder that will decide everything. Inside that folder, a single invoice. Handwritten, coffee-stained, the paper trail they all missed. If you've ever been overlooked, ever been dismissed, ever been told you don't matter, what happens in the next 50 minutes will change how you see power forever. Subscribe now and turn on notifications, because this story will restore your faith in justice when institutions fail. 1. The crisis. The Herman Miller conference chair cost $18,000. Marcus Whitmore didn't know that. Men like Marcus never knew the price of furniture. They knew the price of silence, the exact dollar amount that made lawsuits disappear, the specific number that transformed federal investigators into sympathetic colleagues who understood that aggressive accounting was just creative wealth management. The chair faced floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking Central Park. Below, autumn bled gold and crimson through trees that cost the city $40,000 each to maintain. Marcus's corner office in 157 commanded views that real estate agents called priceless, which meant roughly $75 million for the penthouse suite, plus $12 million annually in overhead that included a dedicated espresso bar, a sommelier-curated wine cellar, and Laura Chun. Laura Chun, who at this exact moment was 3 floors down in the auxiliary copy room, hands shaking as she stared at the document that shouldn't exist. The copy room smelled of toner and stale coffee. Fluorescent lights hummed their electrical prayer over beige walls that hadn't been painted since 2008. No windows. No ventilation except the rattle of ancient air ducts. Laura had worked here for 19 months. Night shift legal support staff. The position that sounded important in the job posting but translated to invisible person who makes copies, fetches coffee, disappears. She made $23 an hour. Marcus made $23,000 per hour. The math didn't matter in this building. Power wasn't measured in salary, but in visibility. Who got seen? Who got heard? Who got remembered? Laura moved through these halls like smoke through wire mesh. Present but formless. Essential but forgettable. Except tonight. Tonight, the lead attorney, Theodore Harrington III, Yale Law, private jet, vacation home in Aspen, had missed his flight from London. Missed. Past tense. The trial started in 6 hours, and the man who'd spent 9 months preparing Marcus's defense was currently pacing Heathrow Airport, screaming at airline representatives who kept apologizing about unprecedented weather conditions while checking their watches and thinking about lunch. The junior partners were in conference room B, panic crystallizing into ice. Laura heard them through the ventilation shaft. We need a continuance. Judge Morrison denied the last 3. She won't grant another. Then we're fucked. Harrington has every brief, every exhibit, every deposition indexed in his head. None of us know the case like he does. Marcus will destroy us. Do you know what he did to the last firm that failed him? We need a miracle. Silence, then. The kind that precedes surrender. Laura looked down at the document in her hands. She'd found it 20 minutes ago, misfiled in a box marked Discovery, Irrelevant. Someone, probably a first-year associate working 20-hour days until their eyes bled, had marked it with a sticky note. Merchant invoice, no relevance, discard. But Laura's grandmother had been a bookkeeper. 50 years in Chinatown, managing accounts for restaurants and laundromats and import shops, tracking every transaction in ledgers she kept locked in a safe beneath her bed. She'd taught Laura Young, numbers don't lie, girl. People lie. Lawyers lie. But numbers keep the truth like water keeps its shape. It always finds the level. Grandma May died 3 years ago. Heart attack at her desk, still balancing books at 78 because Social Security didn't cover rent in a city that devoured the poor like appetizers. Laura had found her, cold hand still holding a pencil, a neat column of figures perfectly aligned on the page before her. The funeral cost $8,000. Laura was still paying it off. And now, holding this invoice, this stupid, coffee-stained merchant invoice from a shipping company in Delaware dated 18 months before Marcus Whitmore's hedge fund accidentally tanked those pension accounts. Laura saw what her grandmother would have seen instantly. The amounts matched. Not perfectly. That would be too obvious. But the rhythms matched, the patterns, the sequence of transactions that showed money moving from account A through a shell company to account B, then fragmenting into 12 smaller accounts, then disappearing offshore. This invoice was the missing link. The single paper trail that proved Marcus knew exactly what he was doing when he told those families their retirement savings had been volatilized by market conditions. He'd stolen it. Every dollar. Deliberately. And his lawyer missed the trial. Laura's phone buzzed. A text from her supervisor. Night staff meeting in 10. Mandatory. She looked at the document. She looked at the ventilation shaft that carried the voices of panicking junior partners. She thought about her grandmother's hands, cramped from decades of pencil work, young, forever, tattooed on her wrist in ink that had faded to blue-gray but never disappeared. What would you risk? Your job? Your reputation? Your entire future in a profession that values silence over truth? Grandma May had a saying for this too. The nail that stands up gets hammered down. But sometimes, girl, the house needs a nail to hold it together. Laura folded the invoice. She walked toward the elevator. Behind her, the copy machine hummed its mindless song, churning out page after page of documents that would be read, filed, forgotten. The machinery of justice that ground forward whether or not justice actually happened. The elevator doors opened. Laura stepped inside. She pressed the button for the executive floor. If you're sitting on the edge of your seat right now, if you can feel what's coming, then you understand why this story matters. But most people will scroll past this moment, past Laura's courage, past the truth she's carrying. Don't be most people. Hit that subscribe button. Because what happens when those elevator doors open will shake you to your core, and you deserve to witness every second. 2. The journey. The executive floor smelled like money. Not metaphorically. Literally. The scent of Tom Ford leather chairs mixed with Joe Malone diffusers that pumped pomegranate noir through air vents, undercut by fresh orchids that cost $200 per arrangement and were replaced daily by a florist who arrived at dawn with offerings the partners never noticed. Laura had been here exactly 3 times in 19 months. Twice to deliver documents after hours when the floor was empty. Once to help set up for a cocktail party where she'd worn black pants and a white shirt and held a tray of canapes that cost more than her weekly groceries. Invisible among guests who discussed market corrections and summer homes while she refilled champagne glasses and collected dirty napkins. Now the floor was alive. Chaos crystallized into expensive panic. Conference room B's glass walls revealed the junior partners in various states of distress. Jackets off, ties loosened, one man with his head in his hands. Through the glass, Laura saw documents scattered across the table like wreckage, coffee cups multiplying, someone gesturing frantically while speaking into a phone. She moved past them. Smoke through wire mesh. Marcus Whitmore's office doors were closed. Mahogany. Floor-to-ceiling. The kind that required a keycard and retinal scan because billionaires didn't trust regular locks. Laura stopped outside. Her reflection stared back from the polished wood. 27 years old. Hair pulled back in a bun that cost $0 to maintain. Blouse from Target. 3 years old. Washed so many times the collar had started to fray. Pants that were supposedly professional but really meant cheap enough to afford on minimum wage. Face that her grandmother used to cup in both hands, saying, "Beautiful girl. Smart girl. Don't let them make you small." Too late, Grandma. This building made everyone small except the people whose names appeared on letterhead. Laura raised her hand to knock. The door opened before her knuckles made contact. A man stood there. Not Marcus. One of the senior associates. Brad something, Georgetown Law, wedding ring that cost more than Laura's car. He looked at her the way people looked at furniture. Present, functional, beneath notice. "We didn't order coffee," he said. "I'm not." Whatever it is, not now. We're in crisis mode. He started to close the door. Laura put her foot in the gap, a move her grandmother taught her, metaphorically, when Laura was 12 and trying to quit violin lessons. You want to close a door, you need to move what's holding it open. People forget, the smallest thing can stop the biggest force if it's positioned right. I have information about the trial, Laura said. Brad blinked. Really looked at her for the first time. Who are you? Laura Chun. Night staff. Legal support. The copy girl? He said it without malice, just fact, reducing 19 months of work to her most basic function. Look, we appreciate your concern, but Theodore Harrington missed his flight. Brad's face went white. How do you? We haven't announced. I heard you. Through the vents. And I found something. She held up the invoice. Brad stared at it like she'd produced a live grenade. Where did you get that? Discovery boxes. Misfiled. It connects Marcus Whitmore's accounts to the offshore transfers 9 months before the pension collapse. That's impossible. We've reviewed every document 12 times. If something like that existed, Harrington would have. Harrington missed it. Everyone missed it. Because it looks irrelevant unless you understand shell company accounting. Brad's hand shot out, fast, grabbing for the paper. Laura pulled it back. I need to speak to Mr. Whitmore, she said. Absolutely not. The trial starts in 6 hours. Which is why we don't have time for. You don't have a lead attorney. You don't have a defense. What you have is a copy room staff member who just found exculpatory evidence that could save your client $500 million. Laura heard her grandmother's voice in her own, steel wrapped in silk. What you don't have is a choice. Brad stared at her. Behind him, through the open door, Laura could see Marcus Whitmore's office, the $18,000 chair, the Central Park view, the Basquiat original on the wall worth more than every apartment in Laura's building combined. Wait here, Brad said. He disappeared inside. Laura waited. Her heart hammered against her ribs like something caged trying to break free. Every survival instinct screamed at her to run, to put the invoice back in its box, to disappear back into the copy room where she belonged. But Grandma May hadn't disappeared. She'd stayed at her desk for 50 years, tracking truth in neat columns, making sure the numbers added up even when powerful people wanted them to lie. The door opened wider. Marcus Whitmore stood there. 6'2". Armani suit, custom-tailored, probably $50,000. Salt and pepper haircut by a stylist who charged $800 per appointment. Face that had smiled from Forbes covers, CNBC interviews, charity galas where he donated millions to causes that photographed well. Face that had shown zero emotion when elderly victims collapsed in the courthouse, sobbing about losing everything. He looked at Laura like she was a bug that had somehow bypassed security. Brad says you found something, Marcus said. His voice was smooth, educated, the kind of voice that convinced juries and seduced investors and never, ever revealed doubt. Laura held up the invoice. This proves you moved the pension fund assets deliberately through shell companies 9 months before the market collapse. It's dated. It's traceable. And it directly contradicts your testimony that the losses were unforeseeable. Silence. Then Marcus smiled. Young lady, he said. Do you have any idea how many documents we've reviewed? How many experts have examined every transaction? If what you're holding was actually relevant, don't you think someone more qualified would have noticed? They didn't notice because it was misfiled as irrelevant. And they're not looking at it the way my grandmother taught me to look at numbers. Your grandmother. The smile widened. Was she a forensic accountant? A securities lawyer? A federal investigator? She was a bookkeeper in Chinatown for 50 years. Marcus laughed. Actually laughed. A sound like champagne bubbles bursting. Brad, why are we wasting time with this? Brad shifted uncomfortably. Sir, the trial is in 6 hours in Harrington. I'm aware of the situation, which is exactly why we don't have time for. Marcus waved his hand at Laura, a gesture that dismissed her entire existence. This, some night shift employee with delusions of importance playing lawyer. I'm not playing, Laura said quietly. I'm holding evidence that will either save you or destroy you, depending on what it actually proves. But you need someone who can read it correctly. Someone who understands how these transactions work. We have 12 partners who understand. Who missed this for 9 months? How much are you paying them per hour? Marcus's smile evaporated. Excuse me. For $1,000 per hour, combined. And they missed a coffee-stained invoice that a $23 per hour copy room staff found in 20 minutes. Laura stepped forward. You don't have a lead attorney. You don't have time to get another one. What you have is me, and this document, and 6 hours to figure out if it saves you or buries you. Security, Marcus said to Brad. Sir, get security. Have her removed. Mr. Whitmore, if she's right. She's not right. She's a nobody playing hero. I don't have time for. You're about to lose $500 million, Laura said. Her voice cut through the office like her grandmother's cleaver through bok choy. Clean, precise, final. Not because you're guilty or innocent. Because you're proud. Because you'd rather lose everything than admit someone invisible might see what you missed. Marcus stared at her. The clock on his wall, a vintage Patek Philippe, one of 12 ever made, ticked toward 3 a.m. 5 minutes, Marcus finally said. Explain what you think you found. Right now, some of you are feeling something you haven't felt in years. Hope that the system might actually work, that truth might actually matter. But here's what breaks my heart. Thousands of people will watch Laura risk everything and never take their own stand. If you believe invisible people deserve to be seen, if you believe courage should be witnessed, then share this story. Share it now. Because silence is how power wins, and your voice, yes, yours, is how stories like this reach the people who need them most. Laura spread the invoice on Marcus's desk. Her hands didn't shake anymore. Something had shifted when he'd tried to dismiss her. Something her grandmother had warned her about. Anger is a tool, girl, not a weapon. Learn the difference. This is a shipping invoice from Trident Maritime Services, dated March 15th, 18 months ago, Laura began. It shows payment for transport of corporate documents and materials from your New York office to a storage facility in Delaware. We ship documents all the time, Marcus said. That proves nothing. The amount is $47,000 for document shipping. So a standard document shipment costs maybe $500. Even for large volume, maybe $2,000. $47,000 suggests either you were shipping physical gold. Laura looked up at him. Or you were paying for something else entirely. Something that needed to look legitimate on paper. Brad leaned forward. What are you suggesting? The date matches the week before you transferred pension fund assets into the shell company, Trident Holdings LLC. Different name, but same word, Trident. Maritime Services versus Holdings. I think someone at your firm got sloppy with the paperwork, used the same company name twice. Once for the fake shipping invoice to justify moving cash. Once for the shell company to receive it. Marcus's jaw tightened. That's speculation. It's a pattern. And patterns are how you trace money laundering. Laura pulled out her phone, showed them a photo she'd taken of another document. This is from the Discovery Files, a list of all corporate entities associated with your hedge fund. Trident Holdings isn't on it, which means it's not officially connected to you, which means when you moved money there, you created distance. Plausible deniability. Unless someone can prove the connection, Brad said slowly. Unless someone can prove you knew about Trident Holdings when you testified under oath that all pension assets remained in legitimate, traceable accounts. Laura looked at Marcus. Did you know about Trident Holdings? I have hundreds of corporate entities. I can't remember every. Yes or no? Because if this invoice connects you to that company, and that company received the pension funds, then you committed perjury. And if you committed perjury, every victim gets their money back plus damages. The office went silent. Outside, through the floor-to-ceiling windows, New York sparkled like diamonds scattered across black velvet. Somewhere in that darkness, 15 families slept in apartments they could barely afford, working second jobs to recover from losses Marcus had called unfortunate but unavoidable market forces. Marcus sat down in his $18,000 chair. For the first time, he looked old. What do you want? He asked quietly. I want you to tell the truth, Laura said. I want those families to get their pensions back. I want justice. Justice. Marcus laughed, but it sounded hollow. You really think justice exists in a courtroom? You think one invoice changes anything? I think, Laura said, that my grandmother spent 50 years making sure numbers told the truth even when people didn't. I think she died at her desk trying to keep books balanced in a world that rewards lies. I think if I have a chance to honor that, if I have one moment to make her work mean something, then yes, one invoice can change everything. Marcus closed his eyes. You have no idea what you're asking. I'm asking you to be human, to admit you made mistakes, to fix them. I'll be destroyed. My reputation, my career, your third yacht. Laura's voice was gentle now, the way her grandmother's had been when teaching hard lessons. Mr. Whitmore, those families lost their futures. You lost nothing except money you'll never spend. The choice isn't between winning and losing. It's between living with what you've done and dying with it. The clock ticked. 3:14 a.m. 5 hours and 46 minutes until trial. Marcus opened his eyes, looked at the invoice, looked at Laura. Call Judge Morrison, he said to Brad. Tell her we need an emergency meeting before trial. Tell her, he swallowed hard. Tell her the defendant wants to change his plea. The transformation. The courthouse smelled like marble and old wood and the accumulated weight of 10,000 verdicts. Laura had never been inside courtroom 9A. She'd imagined it, though, during the long nights in the copy room. Pictured her grandmother standing in the gallery, watching justice happen the way she'd watched numbers finally balance after hours of searching for the error. Now Laura stood in the center of it all. Judge Morrison sat at the bench, silver-haired and sharp-eyed, looking down at Marcus Whitmore the way a surgeon looks at a tumor. Something that needed to be removed, but carefully. Mr. Whitmore, the judge said, you're telling me you want to change your plea to guilty? Not exactly, Your Honor. Marcus stood at the defense table, Brad beside him, 12 other partners conspicuously absent. I want to admit that my previous testimony was incomplete, and I want to make restitution. The gallery erupted. 15 families, all present at 6 a.m. because this was their last chance, their final shot at justice. They surged forward against the barrier, crying, shouting, demanding to know what this meant. Judge Morrison's gavel cracked like thunder. Order. I will have order. Silence fell, broken only by the sound of elderly people crying. Mrs. Patricia Rodriguez, 72 years old, former elementary school teacher whose husband had died of a heart attack 3 months after losing their pension. She held a photo of him against her chest, creased and worn from touching. Mr. James Chun, 68. No relation to Laura, but same last name. Same Chinatown neighborhood. Same story. A lifetime of savings vanished because a man in an expensive suit had decided numbers were suggestions rather than laws. These were the people Grandma May had served. The restaurant owners, the laundromat operators, the small business owners who counted every dollar because every dollar mattered. Your Honor, Marcus continued, his voice steady but stripped of its usual confidence. This young woman. He gestured to Laura, standing awkwardly in the aisle because she wasn't a lawyer, wasn't a plaintiff, wasn't technically anything except a witness, found evidence that my legal team missed. Evidence that proves I knowingly moved pension assets through shell companies to avoid regulation. The judge's eyebrow rose. You're confessing to fraud? I'm confessing to believing I was smarter than the system. To believing that complicated financial instruments made illegal actions legal. To believing. Marcus looked at the families in the gallery. To believing that numbers were just numbers, not lives. Mr. Whitmore, I'm proposing full restitution. $500 million, distributed among the 15 families according to their original pension values, plus interest calculated from the date of loss. Additionally, I'm establishing the May-Chin Memorial Fund, he glanced at Laura, to provide financial literacy education and legal support for working-class families facing corporate fraud. Laura's breath caught. He'd remembered her grandmother's name from their 3 a.m. conversation, remembered her story, remembered that numbers represented lives. Judge Morrison looked at Laura. Ms. Chun approached the bench. Laura walked forward on legs that felt borrowed, climbed the steps to where the judge sat like justice incarnate. You found this evidence? The judge asked quietly. Yes, Your Honor. In misfiled discovery documents. And you're not an attorney? No, Your Honor. I work in the copy room. Night shift. Judge Morrison smiled, small, private, the kind of smile that suggested she'd seen a lot of injustice in 30 years on the bench and was grateful for the occasional glimpse of the opposite. Your grandmother would be proud. Laura's eyes burned. She taught me to read numbers like truth. The world needs more people like her. Like you. The judge turned back to Marcus. Mr. Whitmore, I'm accepting your proposal with conditions. You'll undergo a full audit by the SEC. You'll cooperate completely with investigators. And you'll personally appear at the restitution hearings to face each family you harmed. I understand, Your Honor. I don't think you do. Not yet. Judge Morrison's voice hardened. But you will. Bailiff, call the plaintiffs forward. One by one, the 15 families approached. Mrs. Rodriguez with her photograph. Mr. Chun with trembling hands. A younger woman with a baby who would never meet her grandfather. An elderly man in a wheelchair who'd suffered a stroke from the stress. They stood before Marcus Whitmore, billionaire, hedge fund genius, man who'd bought yachts with their futures, and they were silent. Not because they forgave him, because words couldn't hold what they'd lost. Laura watched from the side. She thought about her grandmother's hands, cramped and scarred from decades of pencil work. Thought about the tattoo. Oh, forever. Some legacies lasted. Ms. Chun, Judge Morrison said, I'm ordering a formal investigation into how these documents were misfiled and why your discovery was overlooked by 12 highly paid attorneys. I suspect we'll find answers that embarrass a lot of people. Laura nodded. She already knew the answer. She'd been invisible. The systems designed to deliver justice had looked past her the same way they'd looked past her grandmother, past the families, past everyone who couldn't afford $4,000 per hour representation. But invisibility was only permanent if you stayed silent. I want to pause here because something is happening to you right now. You're feeling something shift, aren't you? That small voice saying maybe the system can be changed, maybe individuals do matter. But feeling it isn't enough. You need to act. Hit that like button if you believe truth should win. Because every like tells the algorithm to show this story to someone else who needs to see it. Every like is a vote for justice. Don't scroll past this moment. Your grandmother, whoever she was, whatever she taught you, deserves better than your silence. 6 months later, the Machen Memorial Fund occupied 3 floors of a converted warehouse in Queens. Not expensive, not glamorous, but equipped with computers, legal reference books, and a staff of 7 full-time counselors who helped working families navigate fraud claims, debt negotiation, and financial literacy. Laura ran it, not because she'd asked for the job, because Marcus Whitmore had called her 2 weeks after the trial, after the restitution checks had been distributed, after the SEC investigation had revealed a systemic pattern of document mismanagement that led to 12 partners voluntarily resigning from the firm. I need someone who knows what it's like to be invisible, Marcus had said. Someone who won't forget why this matters. Laura had said yes, but on her terms. No board oversight, no corporate interference, no billionaire saviors. Just resources and the freedom to serve the people her grandmother had served. On opening day, Mrs. Rodriguez came. She walked slowly, leaning on a cane, but her eyes were bright. Your grandmother, she said to Laura. She did my restaurant's books for 30 years. Never charged full price. Always made sure I understood the numbers. Mrs. Rodriguez touched the plaque on the wall. Machen, 1945 to 2022, Young, and cried quietly. She saved my business 3 times. I came to tell you, you saved my life. Thank you. Laura hugged her. This woman who'd lost so much, who'd fought for justice against impossible odds, who'd stood in a courtroom and refused to disappear. My grandmother used to say, Laura whispered, numbers don't lie. They just wait for someone honest enough to read them. You read them, honey. You read them true. In Manhattan, in an office that no longer had floor-to-ceiling windows or $18,000 chairs, Marcus Whitmore met with federal investigators. He'd lost the yacht, lost the penthouse, lost most of his fortune to restitution, fines, and legal fees. But he'd kept something else, his humanity. The lead investigator, a woman named Sarah Park who'd grown up in the same Chinatown neighborhood as Laura, asked him the question everyone wanted answered. Why did you confess? You could have fought it, hired better lawyers. Probably won. Marcus looked at her. Do you know what it's like to look at someone and realize you've become the villain in their story? To see yourself reflected in their eyes and not recognize what you've become? No. A 27-year-old copy room worker showed me that mirror, and I couldn't unsee it. He smiled sadly. Funny thing about invisibility, once you notice the people you've been ignoring, you can't stop seeing them. They're everywhere, and they've been there the whole time, holding the world together while people like me took credit. Sarah Park made a note. That's going in my report. Good. Maybe someone will read it and change before they need a copy room worker to save them from themselves. Laura stood in the Machen Memorial Fund lobby, watching families stream through the doors. Construction workers seeking help with predatory loans. restaurant owners facing bogus health violations, elderly couples trying to understand reverse mortgages, invisible people, forgotten people, the people her grandmother had served for 50 years with nothing but a pencil, a ledger, and an unshakable belief that numbers, like justice, should always balance. Laura's phone buzzed. A text from Judge Morrison. Saw the fund's 6-month report. Your grandmother would burst with pride. Keep fighting. Laura smiled. Sent back. Forever. Yo. She turned to the next family waiting at the intake desk. A young mother with 2 children, eyes red from crying, hands clutching paperwork she didn't understand. Laura sat down across from her. Tell me your story, Laura said gently. All of it. Don't leave anything out. And the mother began to speak. And Laura listened. And somewhere in the vast machinery of justice that so often failed the powerless, something small but essential clicked into place. A nail holding the house together, just as Grandma May had promised. Because the truth doesn't need a loud voice. It just needs someone patient enough to read it. This is where I need you to make a choice. You've watched Laura risk everything. Her job, her safety, her entire future, to honor her grandmother's legacy and serve forgotten people. Now ask yourself, what are you willing to risk? Subscribing costs you nothing. Turning on notifications takes 2 seconds. But sharing this story, that's how you become part of the change. That's how invisible people finally get seen. So here's my question for you. What wisdom did your grandmother teach you? What lesson did she give you that you're meant to pass forward? Share it in the comments. Let's build a memorial not just for Mei Chun, but for every grandma, every forgotten teacher, every invisible person who held the world together while others took the credit. Subscribe, share, comment, because this story only matters if you refuse to let it disappear. And you? You're the nail that holds everything together. Don't let me down. For everyone who felt invisible today, this story is for you. For everyone who's been dismissed, overlooked, told they don't matter, your grandmother knew the truth. You are the foundation. Subscribe if you believe that. Share if you know someone who needs to hear it. Because the world changes when forgotten people refuse to stay silent. What wisdom did your grandmother teach you?